You became the first ever chief executive, and for that, you'll always have a special place in a very special part of global history. What was your vision back then in 1997, and how far did you manage to achieve it?
I think there is always a lot you feel you could have done better and more, but looking back and looking at the 20 years, we have our ups and downs. But by and large, the most important thing, is that whether one country, two system is successfully implemented in Hong Kong. And you come to Hong Kong from time to time, you will see that the way of life has not changed. The free market economy is still thriving, that the rule of law is being held up very well. The internationalization of our city is very much the same as was before. The lifestyle hasn't changed. So one country, two system is really going well. But it is not for us to say it's going well. I like to refer to you a World Bank indexation of about 210 countries. Hong Kong government's competence, it went number 4 to number 2 over a period from 20 years. For instance, the rule of law, we rose from 20 to something like 16, improving all the time. And in terms of governance of stock market, for instance, regulatory work, tops number 1 in the world. It's a World Bank institution which is making all these one country, two system is working.
Hong Kong is marking 20 years since the handover in 1997. 2 whole decades have now passed. Does it feel as long as that to you?
Every day goes by very quickly. When Hong Kong was returned to China, Hong Kong's economy was 16% of Chinese economy in terms of GDP. Now it's down to 3% only. But on the other hand, the relationship, the economic relationship between the two is now really very, very, very close already. So the question is how we can leverage China's fast growth, especially under one country, two systems. How do we leverage that to benefit Hong Kong more and more every day? So that's one change you notice. The other change you notice is that in colonialism, you have one political structure, and one country, two system, there's a very noticeably different political structure.
If we think back to 1997, that was about 20 years after China began its reforms, and that triggered this huge economic transformation. China was no longer a part of the world. It was now at the political heart of it. Obviously, that gave Hong Kong opportunities at the handover. What were the wider opportunities?
In Chinese, it's called 香港好,国家好. 国家好,香港更好, That was what I really believed in. In English, it says, Hong Kong is doing well, we can contribute to our country's activities. When our country is doing well, boy, we'll benefit a lot from it. And this is in fact exactly happened, because in the 80s, when China began the opening up process, at that time, Hong Kong was the first to rally around that call. And we went to southern China, we started investing, and we built up the industry and so on and so forth. We did a whole lot, to get this thing going. But today, China is the second largest economy in the world. And whatever they do, actually, we are just next door.
We think of the handover as the night of June 30th, moving into the morning of July 1st. But in truth, there were many years of very complex negotiations. I think many of them took place in this very room where we're now sitting. What were some of the toughest obstacles that the negotiators had to find a way to move around?
Well, I was not part of that negotiation, James, but I would say this, that one country, two system has never been tried before, okay? So therefore, it's bound to be difficult in negotiation between these two countries. But Mr. Deng Xiaoping was trying to find a way to peacefully making the transfer of sovereignty back to China possible. And also, he wanted to make sure Hong Kong people afterwards could still, live in Hong Kong comfortably in a way that, nothing really much has changed. That's why he ingeniously devised this one country, two system. And that's why you see this sovereignty handover peacefully carried out. So in the process, yes, there are lots of negotiations, bits and pieces, but the outcome, anyway, is there for us to see.
Do you think if Deng Xiaoping was here today and he could see Hong Kong today, do you think he'll say that one country, two systems has evolved in the way that he as the architect had intended it to be?
I think, if you ask me, I think we could probably have done better. But yes, I think by and large, we're doing all right.
What would you do better, in your words?
In Hong Kong before 1997, everybody seemed to be living happily ever after. But it's a one-man band, you see. The decision is made and that's it. But in 1997, after the return of Hong Kong, many Hong Kong people feel liberated from the system before. And, in Chinese saying, 当家作主. So lots of voices, lots of noises. And once you move in that direction, which we are doing in the political system we have, everybody has a view, and if I have dinner at night with my wife, my children, we all have different views about different issues. So it's very natural. And so when people ask me why there's so much division, I say, well, in the old days, we just don't bother to voice our views because it doesn't make that much difference. But today, everybody makes a difference. So these are the things. And when you have that sort of a liberal atmosphere, if you don't manage everything well, you get into trouble also. This is the problem we now have. We're managing it. We're making sure it doesn't get out of hand. And political transition 20 years later is still a work in progress.
2 decades ago, Hong Kong turned a page in its history. The British colony became part of China once again. Over the years, the region has gone through ups and downs. Hong Kong's next chapter is still being written. Join us on our journey as we chronicle Hong Kong's story since 1997.
You led Hong Kong not only at the handover, but through that transition that you just described. And the first years were very difficult. There was the Asian financial crisis that you had to manage, but also probably the first new major disease of the century, which was, of course, SARS. As the leader of Hong Kong at that time, what did you take away from those two experiences?
It's a very, very difficult period for Hong Kong because Asian financial crisis started on July 2nd, one day after the handover, when Thailand delinked the currency. So Hong Kong was directly hit, although the real hit came to us almost a year later it was the speculators trying to de-link our US dollar, Hong Kong dollar peg, trying to destroy our stock market almost. So it was real experience for us to defend ourselves and so on and so forth. And we did that very successfully. And we eventually beat them, into a retreat. We were really happy, and we made a lot of money as a result of that. And then, in the case of SARS, it was really painful seeing people dying and not knowing what you can do at the beginning. It was frightening, but it was helplessness, But throughout all this, we hold our head high and worked very hard. And unfortunately, over 300 people died from both incidents. We learn from it. But I think the most important negative thing is this, you see, that from 1998 to 2003, the 6 years, there was tremendous contraction of our economy. Especially in 2003, the whole economy was grinding to a halt because no people on the road. The hotel has 1 or 2 occupants, not 1%, not 2%, 1 or 2 person occupying a hotel. And everything is grinding to a halt, So it was a huge economic difficulty for us, a free fall of our property market. And at the end of the day, who came out and helped is the central government of China, the Chinese people.
People here who walk on the streets, who work in retail, do you think that they're conscious of that dynamic?
Oh yeah, of course they do. But in those days, it was really, really bad. And it's these things that make things happen again. Then 2008, we had another financial crisis, and we come through that one also.
That's obviously part of the price of being a part of the world.
Yeah, that's right.
But listening to the complexities and the huge challenges that you obviously face, did you actually ever want to be chief executive?
I never expected to be chief executive, and I really never did. I feel the responsibility. I understand the calling, and I just go for it and do the best I can. And in the process, I learned a great deal. And because I was a businessman, I have not been in politics. So the good thing is that I have the tenacity to fight through adversity. The bad thing is that I'm not very good at managing PR.
I want to go back to the roots of that tenacity, because you were born not in Hong Kong, but like so many people who are very influential in Hong Kong, you were born in Shanghai. What was childhood like for Tung Chee-Hwa?
I was really very much influenced by my father. When we arrived in Hong Kong, I was 11 years old, and I went to a school nearby for 6年级了, it's, I don't know what you call it in English, the primary 6, I guess, primary 6. And at that time, my father started training me. Every day I come back from school, I have to read 2 newspapers, raise 2 particular events or articles that I do not understand or I'm curious to him. The newspaper is 大公报 and 星岛日报. In fact, today, every day, I still carry these 2 newspapers. But in those days, he asked me to pick the articles and talk to him when he comes home. And then he would pick out one or two subjects. And through these things, he really tried to mold me, my thoughts, what is it about being Chinese and many things like that, because he lived through all the difficulties of the Japanese and before that and so on. So
Your grandfather to, I think, 9 grandchildren.
that's right.
Many people see you as a grandfather to Hong Kong as well. If you could do what your father did, if you could pick out 2 major world events for young people here today, which 2 would you share?
Well, firstly, James, we're good friends, so don't make me feel very old, okay? I think the event that young people really should see is that, to understand what's happening in China, the transformation of China since 1949, and then the second stage since 1978, the reform and opening up. They changed the world, history of the world, changed the destiny of Chinese people. How did it happen? Why did it happen? How can we ride this 顺风车, to the future? And this is a chance in a lifetime, For me, at 80 years old, it's a bit late. But for you and for people of the 20s, 30s, my God, what opportunities, how to get yourself involved in that process and then eventually, achieve what you want to achieve in life for yourself and then probably for your country.
You became a global leader on July 1st. I remember millions of people watching on television. I was just one of them. And you were standing on the stage and you were about to take the oath of office. At that point, what were you thinking? What was going through your mind?
I was awed by the occasion, But I think it's really a sense of burden because, one country, 2 systems, something never tried before, but something we cannot fail. And how can we make sure it succeeds? It's very worrying, very worrying. But once you jump into it, it's much better. And with the central government, who is always very supportive and very understanding, so it makes things work much, much easier.
The harbor of fragrance, a young city in transition.
2 decades since the British handover, what remained and what changed?
CGTN takes a close look at Hong Kong, its people, prosperity and possibilities.
From troubled politics to a shifting economy.
From civic life to public debate.
From a brilliant past to a promising future. See it all on our special program.
Leading up to that handover ceremony, though, and let's be fair, there was real concern among some people in Hong Kong. Some of them chose to move to countries like Canada, Australia, the United States, and many of them returned to Hong Kong within a few short years. Fundamentally, why do you think they moved away, and why did they then choose to come back?
Well, because I think it's very simple. There's economic opportunity here, a better economic opportunity in Hong Kong than where they've gone to, and that is principally the reason. And then the other reason, very simply, is that was always their home. So they're like coming home again,
I ask you that question because I wonder how much of the challenge today in Hong Kong society has to do with the question of identity. Do you think the Hong Kong people know who they are?
I think if you ask the people of Hong Kong, overwhelmingly people know who they are, and they know they are Chinese. But there is a real challenge for us, which is this, that my father, he was passionate about China. And why? Because he saw what it was like when the China is weak, when everyone get kicked around. So he always said, never again, never again. And he instilled this spirit in me, you know. And in a modern world today, how much parents spend with the children, what kind of education it gets at schools. There are all these problems. It's not just a Hong Kong problem, it's a worldwide problem. And the thing is that, you know, we have to say to ourselves, not me, I'm the grandfather, I shouldn't be that much involved, but the parents and the school, particularly the teachers, their responsibility to each individual student, how important it is to understand about proper values, have proper attitudes, and understand where the world is going and where your own country is like. And these are all the things that needs to be done. And obviously, around the world, this is not enough. And Hong Kong has this huge challenge we have to.
I remember you going to Downing Street to meet Tony Blair.
Yes.
And to put those historic differences in the past. What did he say to you?
Well, it's the past and it's going to be the future.
In 2014, we saw significant protests in Hong Kong, and you would have been a first-hand witness to what happened night after night, week after week here. How did it make you feel at the time, and what did it inform you in terms of what Hong Kong and its people need in the future?
Well, you know, it was in 2003. It was 2003 in July. And you know what we have just gone through at that time? Do you remember? It was at the end of 5 years of contraction, you know, where property prices has fallen a lot, 50, 60%. It was at a time when my government colleagues asked for the retrenchment of the budget, to cut salary of all government employees, to shrink the size of the civil servants, and to impose taxes on all classes of citizens, because the anxiety was that would there be another financial crisis? And in the middle of that, we had SARS, and in the middle of that, we wanted to legislate Article 23, which is about Hong Kong security and national security. So it's almost the congregation of the worst that you want to do to your own people. And that's how it happened. And I think the responsibility, if you look back, is that, well, you know, when SARS was happening and when all the other things is happening, you can't do all these things together. SARS alone is enough sort of a hit already, you know. But that was the reason why, you know. And then things would begin to change, started to do much better, and so on and so forth. You learn from it, and we were inexperienced. We were not good enough, and we were anxious in different ways to make sure some of the objectives are met. But when they all come together, it's a huge hit. But my point is that for every one of these things, you learn from these mistakes and become better, and including the society. Everybody become better.
You've lived an extraordinary life. Life doesn't need to be bleak. Life can be exciting, can be prosperous in every way. And you're proof of that because you always smile. For the people watching this interview, especially the people here in Hong Kong whose futures are tied to this place, what hope do you give them that they must remember to achieve that exciting, dynamic, prosperous life?
I think, is to have fun. But the most important thing is this, I left the business when I was 60. I now have 20 years of unbelievable experience that make huge determination. This 20 years and hopefully beyond, I will help people in Hong Kong. I want Hong Kong to succeed. I will want my own country, China, to succeed, to realize the Chinese dream, our dream. And it's so fun doing it. Everything I do is trying to really help, because there's so many good people out there. They work with you together. You should all do it. It's a fantastic experience.